bit me right on the pointer finger, like
Okay.
right there. And so every finger was swollen, like huge.
Okay.
And then the swelling went all the way up my arm and it stopped about right here. And they would mark it every 30 minutes. They would mark the swelling. And it would just, every 30 minutes, it would go up like an inch. And it was pretty
Wow.
interesting from like a snake nerd perspective. I thought it was really cool. And the doctors and the nurses were like, what the fuck is wrong with this kid?
Fasten your seatbelt.
On today's episode, we have our first biologist on the show, and Andrew Austin brings his expertise and these fascinating stories about his experience as a naturalist, as a conservationist, his numerous animal bites, and gosh, even some of the poisonous ones. Let's get to it. Andrew Austin, here with us today from the great state of Texas.
Yes, it's quite an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you taking the time and you drove in.
I did. When I fly to a place, I feel disconnected from the place I'm going to. I want to see the changes in the ecosystem as I go to a new place. So here I am.
I love that, though. I think as someone who, while we don't experience the outdoors exactly the same way, I think there's an appreciation for that. And I heard you talking about that earlier about, you wanted to drive in and experience the area. And I'm the exact same way. I think even though sometimes those drives can be long, and since we're talking about Texas, there are sections of highway through West Texas that I'm like, oh my gosh, it never ends.
Yeah.
But I do think the experience of the drive is something I've fallen in love with in my own personal hobby. So I totally related to that.
Yeah. No, I flew to Arizona recently, and I landed in Phoenix, and I was like, this is cool, but I didn't get to see like the landscape change through Texas and all the way over here. But it is a very long drive, so
it is. Yeah, time. Unfortunately, it's a lot of time.
Time is a limiting factor. But it's great to be here, and I'm really excited to talk to you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and you are. I want to kind of dive into, just for lack of a better word, your title. What do you? I've been reading up on you, and the conservationist side of you is definitely what's coming through. But is that really all you are? Biologist? What would you qualify yourself?
I don't know how to characterize myself at this point because I've really spread my wings. I graduated with a degree in wildlife ecology now 3 years ago. I went to Texas A&M University, although I don't claim the Aggie cult. I just went there because they have a great wildlife program. And I got to meet a lot of great people there, people I look up to. I worked in the biology field for 3 years, and that's something I'm very passionate about is wildlife biology. Prior to that, I was, a wildlife educator. So I've always, everything I've done and am currently doing is related to wildlife, but I currently don't work as a full-time biologist.
Okay.
I do some part-time stuff, and I help with various projects, film projects, research. I help friends out, but my day job right now is I'm a duck call maker. I make and sell duck calls for the oldest duck call company in Texas and probably the United States. But if I had to just really characterize myself, I'm a conservationist.
Okay.
That's it.
And what is that job or those, what does that mean? Because I think I hear, environmentalist, conservationist, naturalist.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I looked into those definitions and I'm like, I feel like they kind of all blend. There's a lot of overlap in my novice or uneducated mind.
Right, yeah. To me, conservation is, it is just living a life that your main concern is how do we really live sustainably and conserve our natural resources. And I'm very passionate about spreading the message of conservation, the good word as I call it, and a lot of that has to do with good land conservation. How do we conserve ecosystems? And there's a lot of very complicated issues with conservation. But then, like, being a naturalist is more of a specific term for somebody that is very interested in studying plants and animals, native ecosystems, and that is also the core of who I am. Is I'm a naturalist. I've been a naturalist since I was a little kid. I've been learning the scientific names of snakes and lizards and amphibians and all these different animals since I was really, really young.
Okay.
But I'm also a hunter, and I used to tournament fish, and if it has to do with the outdoors, I probably touched it, except for overlanding. That's something I have not done.
We'll get you involved in that.
But
We might know some people.
The consumptive use and non-consumptive use of wildlife, I'm involved with all that.
Deep in the Heart, the film that you and Ben Masters, I mean, let me back up for the audience at home. Ben Masters created, he directed and wrote
Yes.
Deep in the Heart, which is basically, I mean, I really saw it as like this love letter to Texas. And the beauty of it is it exposed me to all, like, I've driven to Austin. I've driven basically kind of that central Texas area.
Hill country.
I have made it all the way to the coast and got to see that.
Yep.
But you're very aware you're missing, thousands and thousands of square miles of nature and probably environments and ecosystems that I didn't even know existed and I was exposed to from that film.
Yeah.
But what was your role with that production?
So with a film like that, it's such a big effort, filming all these different species around the state. Ben would enlist a local biologist. No matter, like, wherever he went, he would find the local naturalists and biologists that are willing to help. And I happen to be someone that was very passionate about Ben's work and look up to Ben. And when I was a sophomore in college, he came to A&M, where he also attended and was in the same program as me. He came to A&M to show The River and the Wall and a couple other short films. And that's when I learned about him. And I was like, wow, he's so cool to work with Ben someday. Then senior year came around and he messaged me on Instagram to meet him because he knew I grew up in this area called the Big Thicket. It's like this really unique region of East Texas where it's like a jungle. It's like palmetto thickets, and they used to call it the bear hunters thicket because there were so many black bears, and the bear hunters would go in there and hunt them in this really thick region. And there's a lot of lore, and it's like a super biodiverse region. And there are certainly more authoritative people that would have been more fit to hire, but me and Ben connected, and I was really honored. And so, yeah, my role was just like a biologist consultant, even though I was still in college. Just because I'm someone that spends a lot of time in the region, and I'm very passionate about that particular area. And so, yeah, Ben enlisted me for about a week. Met them out there, and seeing how a film is produced and being around like professionals in the wildlife film industry was really, really cool. Because it's always been something that's like peripheral in my like goals in life, is to like be a wildlife filmmaker. Not like the main goal, but like that's one of those things that'd be really cool. And to like really see what they do was really fascinating. And seeing how Ben takes, these different ecological concepts of this area and like puts it into the story and the conservation aspect of it, it was really, really fascinating. And but basically, like, yeah, my role was helping give him more context to the ecosystems of the area, and also just straight up catching critters, like going out catching snakes to film, and turtles and insects and different invertebrates, and showing them different plant communities and ecosystems like around the area, and then helping them wrangle the critters for the shot. That's pretty much it.
That sounds like a dream job.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I was around that time. It was my last. It's like the last 3 weeks of my time in college, and so I was like, go out in the field all day, and then I'd go and like do online, like class online. So it's
the idea that Texas contains kind of this melting pot of all of these like iconic things,
species and
ecosystems, but also like the Rockies and the deserts and the swamplands and the plainlands, like that's all converging in Texas. And while I guess I understood that, it was like that makes that a really incredible spot on the map. Yeah. And it really would just expose you to all kinds of amazing things. So I can see where like you're like, I'm good. I've got plenty to study right here.
Yeah. Well, and there's also there's a lot of conservationists out there that are very concerned about like conserving a species that's on the other side of the world, where they actually can't really do a whole lot. one big thing I preach to people that want to do good conservation and be involved is start in your own backyard, because that's where you can actually really make a difference. You know, posting about elephants in Africa all the time and share, like, I love elephants and conserving elephants is very important, but most countries are doing that quite well at this point. There's very sustainable ways to hunt them, which complicated topic. I can't imagine shooting an elephant, but anyhow, there's like sustainable wildlife management in Africa, and there's like elephants are good. So especially young people that are getting into conservation, I encourage them to learn about the ecosystems in your own backyard, because then you can actually get out there and learn about them. You can actually make a big difference. And so, you know, I was very lucky to live in a very cool part of the world that is called Texas. And it's just this interesting area where we have coastline that influences our biodiversity. We have where the eastern deciduous forest, which we're right in the heart of it right here in Alabama, it ends, and then it transitions into the Chihuahuan Desert. And there's like all these like little like ecotones and these interesting ecosystems and all this amazing plant and animal diversity. But it's also a state that has a lot of pressures on our natural resources. So it's a great place to be a wildlife biologist and someone that likes these things.
Yeah. It is interesting, and I'm sure we'll maybe get into this more, but being somebody that has in the overlanding space and the off-road space, in this camping experience that I live, on the west side of our country, we have a lot of public land. So I have like really jumped into this thing the opportunities are endless to explore in California and Arizona and Utah, just because the public land is everywhere. And so I find Texas so fascinating because that is not the case in Texas. And I have dabbled very little, so I feel like I'm nowhere near, like I can barely even have an opinion on what I've experienced. But there are a lot of native species. It's not just public land with exotic animals on for hunting purposes. Because that's kind of, I think, my vision of Texas is like you just see these big ranches with these huge game fences. And I always like, and then there's some like African gazelle looking thing that I've never seen before. And I'm like, that doesn't seem like that's supposed to be here. But after, you know, just doing a little bit of research, you're realizing like, well, of course, because of the geography of Texas, it's brought in all these natural things. And then you go back to the history and like the history of the bison or the history of, there's the is it a goat? No, it's not a goat. Pronghorn, yeah. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, all this stuff was here. It's just not the vision of Texas that I have now in modern day. Is that still, are those types of species what you're trying to like conserve here? The native ones, or is it?
Yeah, for sure. One very important aspect of being a conservationist is to be concerned about the native species in your area. And, you know, there is, to me, an issue with bringing all these exotics into the state. There's a lot of land that, especially around Central and West Texas, that, you know, and as you said, Texas is like 98% privately owned, which is very unfortunate for a public land hunter like I am. But so much of our land being managed for non-natives is a real tragedy because our native species, that's part of our identity as a culture, and it's our obligation to conserve the native species. Texas is a very complicated state for wildlife issues because of the private land thing. And that's one thing I'm always thinking about is how do we get more public land?
Do you see and maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, but do you see a pathway to getting more public land? Is that even like a conversation that can be? I mean,
there's so much money in these private land industries, these big cattle operations, or I mean, there's like a handful of landowners that own like millions of acres, and they're not giving it away.
I kind of tip my hat a little bit to the pride that Texas has in their way of doing things. And, you know, I know if we know Texas history, like they very much, some people view like they're their own place. Yeah. Like, yes, we're a part of the United States, but we're also, we're Texas. Yeah. And I like that identity a little bit. Like, I think it's like, okay, least we are proud to be Texan, and that's very cool. But I just wonder, like, yeah, how does this work for all these animals? And
Yeah.
in long term, I mean, I don't know, maybe you have a better insight on this, but like, what if, like, are there risks of these animals, of more exotic animals invading
There's
other
risk,
areas?
yeah. There's a couple things to say about private land stewardship. We have very good private landowners out there too that are managing their land for native species.
Okay,
Especially
so it
in
is
South Texas, like the King Ranch, for example. That is a working cattle ranch, but they harbor a lot of a very healthy ecosystem with a lot of really rare species, and there's several big ranches in Texas that manage for both cattle and wildlife, and that's something that a lot of people don't realize you can do. Even cattle ranchers that aren't good stewards of the land, they overgraze their cattle pastures, and they do things that are bad for native wildlife when they could actually be benefiting cattle and wildlife if they manage their land better. But the spread of invasive deer and species in general is always going to be a problem. Aside from the popular stuff like axis deer and aoudad, and down in South Texas they have these ginormous antelope called nilgai. They're huge. Are you familiar with them?
yes.
I was down in South Texas recently, and you see them walking across the savannas there, and it's like you've teleported to India.
Yeah.
It doesn't look, but they've been there for over 100 years, and they, in some ways, they actually kind of benefit the brush country. People think of them as like ecosystem engineers because they form these trails, and other species use them. So they're almost like what biologists would call like a naturalized species. Like they've been here so long, they're filling a niche that was kind of wide open, and maybe their presence here is actually a net positive for the native ecosystem, which is, it's hard to say that because I'm like such a purist with native species. But our biggest threat is pigs, though, feral hogs.
Yeah.
That is a constant battle. But the problem is they're not going anywhere. We control them on a large scale, but they persist.
Yeah. I want to go back to that, but before we get too far away, you mentioned that this is something you've enjoyed since childhood. So what was this just like little kid just always loved the bugs and the animals and nature, or were you inspired by something specific?
Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, inspired me at a very young age.
Okay.
And seeing him on TV, watching him every day after school, like that really like laid the path for me to I knew when I was 6 years old that I wanted to be a wildlife biologist. So I stayed too. I think my parents probably thought I would like grow out of it at some point. And I always had snakes in the house and all this stuff.
Okay.
And thankfully they're very supportive, but I think they probably thought I was going to grow out of it, but I didn't. I'm still a child to this day. I'm still catching critters.
I think
in my
there's
free
something
time.
really cool about maintaining that childlike thing. I mean, it's like you didn't let life or adulthood sear that out of you, and that curiosity, I think, is something that I've rediscovered again. Like, kind of lost it for a period of time, but that brings me joy to hear like you're just, I'm just curious, because I think that really is, I mean, that is what fuels how we explore the outdoors. I'm fascinated by what you do because of the animal aspect, because I always feel that that's the deficit while we're out, is like I can enjoy, I can read a trail, I can get us to camp, I can be at camp, I can do all that really well. But man, if an animal comes through, I'm like, we don't have an internet connection. I don't know what that is. So, I mean, I think I'm not alone when I say we all love watching nature shows or learning about different animals. And I do feel like coupling that with the adventure side and going out and exploring new places, it's like, I get that.
I love adventure.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it too, is the adventure.
And it doesn't have to be like crazy to be adventure. I think it just has to be pushing beyond what you know and going, okay, well, we're going to experience something different. Whatever comes, we're going to be ready for it. Yeah. And it's that's how I want to like live. And I would assume it's similar to you, but I'm like, I want to carry this through the rest of my life, however that's possible.
Yeah, I don't see myself ever straying from the path. I'm not going to let society pressure me into normalcy.
Well, and don't. I mean, And a time where I think everyone's conforming to look like everyone else because, trends are important. So we want to all follow the trends and we all want to
And it's
feel.
human nature, I guess.
Absolutely.
But
But I mean, the movers and shakers, the people that are going to change the next generation. And if you're doing it for good, with positive intentions, you're going to have to be different. So as a kid, going out and just catching reptiles, like, were you educated in some way on how to do that?
no.
Is that just trial and error? Just
Steve
gonna figure it
Irwin,
out?
just watching Steve Irwin, which
Okay.
a lot of people criticize Steve for setting a bad example because he would go out and he would pick up the most venomous snakes in the world and he would free handle them, not with tools. Like, if you're going to be responsible, you want to use a snake hook or snake tongs to safely handle the snakes. But Steve was so passionate about interacting with the individual animals on camera, especially, that he'd get really carried away. And like, you got all these kids that look up to him, and like, all we know is if you catch a snake, you just pick it up and free handle it, venomous or not. So my first experiences catching venomous snakes, I was going out and just picking them up. Cottonmouths, copperheads, coral snakes. I was literally just free handling them and
Just not afraid?
not afraid. Well, there's like a sense of fear, but it's turned to adrenaline and fascination.
Okay, I see snake and I run.
It was like this feeling of euphoria, like it puts you in the moment. I think being someone that was really shy, when I would do that, it would like make me feel so present. And I don't know, but I don't free handle snakes now. I don't have to. I'm fascinated just looking at them and taking pictures. But yeah, to answer your question, I didn't really have mentorship until I got into the YouTube scene somewhere along the way when I was like 12 or 13, and I found other people like me, and I found a mentor through that, and he mailed me a snake hook. His name is Ori Martin. You should check him out. He's this really wonderful guy that goes out and educates people about snakes. But and took the time to send some random internet kid a new snake hook so I can safely handle the snake.
It's like, let's not do that anymore.
But whereas the other older people in the hobby and the herping community, they were just bashing me the whole time.
Okay, you're going to have to
So
explain
herping is the act of looking for reptiles and
Okay.
amphibians. Herpetology is the study of reptiles and amphibians, like ornithology. Ornithology is the study of birds. Ichthyology is the study of fish. Mammalogy is.
study of mammals.
Mammals,
That one,
yeah.
that's the only
That's
one I
okay.
would have gotten out of all that.
So you got all these different ologies. But
That's so crazy. I love that fearless I mean, you're doing what you're meant to. You are doing what you were born to do. Because
But I try to downplay any like sensationalism when it comes to it, because that's a big problem. If I want to get people to like snakes, I can't fearmonger them and be like, oh, look, I'm catching a venomous snake. Look how badass I am. Or so I really try to like normalize snakes. And because a lot of people, they really want to like play into that, wow, that's so dangerous. How do you do that? I'm like, it's really not. When you have like a snake hook and you like know a little bit about them, they're actually not that bad, to be honest.
that resonates. I have a friend in the off-road space who has just maybe like you always had kind of a fascination with snakes, and he's kind of taken this. It's very much just a grassroots thing. It's like making stickers and shirts and stuff, but it's I break for snakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jim Bob,
Yep.
shout out. But he's kind of, again, very just a small little movement, but it's wherever he can, he is just educating us as like off-roaders who are out, exploring a backcountry. And I think the tragedy is, usually or sometimes we can be moving at speed on a trail.
Yeah.
And
Run over snakes.
it's dusty or you just don't see it. And before you know it, you run over something. So he's trying to kind of raise awareness that way. And then also there's kind of a culture, and maybe it's everywhere, but if something looks venomous or dangerous in any way, there's kind of a sport in killing it and then showing off the kill online. And he's come against that pretty vocally. Like, we're in their area.
Yeah.
Like, just, don't touch them. Don't just let them go. But I appreciate that, because I do think in an internet world, it's, the unique needs to be photographed, and we want to interact with nature in a way. And we are the guests in their environment.
Right.
And so, like, understanding that level of respect. I mean, things happen. There are accidents, and I've been out with people where, animals have been injured, and it's like, everyone's devastated. This was not intended. But also, we need to learn from that. How do we avoid this next time?
This is the Anthropocene. This is the age of humans where you can't even look out onto a prairie without seeing wind turbines. And so that sucks.
Can you explain? It's been fascinating over the last couple of years. We've had a lot of very visible hunters, and I think through the internet and everything, all the way we consume entertainment. But it's allowed hunters to have a platform to speak on the benefits to wildlife through hunting, through you're conserving. And I know this is probably, common sense for you, but I don't think it is. I think I still feel like there's people that just hear hunting and just assume it's the hunting of, the original days in Texas where we're just decimating populations and, forcing things to go extinct. Can you explain like the nuance of how hunting actually conserves or aids in conservation?
So like the story of conservation wildlife in the United States is, around, like the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, market hunting was a big deal. And it was not done under any sort of conservation management. So people were just harvesting wildlife at a rate that was not sustainable, and we lost species. We've removed predators from a large part of the North American landscape, which is really a tragedy. But ecosystems, they evolve over millions of years, and they achieve balance. And there's predator and prey relationships, and there's all these ecological relationships that keep a balanced ecosystem. And then when you take away an apex predator, which has a very large influence on that ecosystem balance, then you get too many herbivores, and you get too many of one species or another species. So hunters kind of fill the void of the predators that were lost. Now, the financial infrastructure for conservation for state and federal wildlife agencies is primarily through hunting. I mean, it's through buying hunting licenses and permits, tags, and it's also taxes on firearms. The Pittman-Robertson Act put an excise tax on firearms. So whether you're buying firearms to hunt or not, like when you buy a firearm, you're generating revenue for wildlife, which is really interesting. So just from a revenue standpoint, hunting is extremely important.
But I think that the circles that I move in, that again, it feels like kind of common sense. We have an understanding of that, but it's very common to run into people who are just and again, it's like you just hear you're killing an animal. And I think an analogy that gets made often is like, if you're eating meat, like commercial farming, going to the grocery store and buying something out of the meat department, that is almost, it is worse. Like the commercial farming industry is horrific if we're really worried about just animals.
Animal rights and environmental issues.
Right. And there's a whole other side. So it's interesting because, I think every hunter I've ever encountered and had conversations with has such a great respect for animals. And they've thought through, because they're not just willy-nilly going out and shooting this animal. There's restrictions on, the age or, whether it's male or female or for the time of year or whatever that season is. And I'm definitely speaking out of school. I have literally no idea.
No, it's great. Yeah, it's all true. Yeah.
But those are done, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, those are done because of individuals like you going out and studying these animals and keeping tabs on the populations, whether predator and prey, and being the first to notice when things are out of balance and maybe going to cause greater damage.
Yeah.
And then you can change the numbers of tags that are issued.
Exactly.
So it's kind of this great partnership between the hunter and the conservationalist. And obviously, in your case, you are the same.
Yeah, well, a lot of biologists are hunters too.
Okay.
That was one cool thing I realized in college. Like, all my professors are hunters. And, I mean, they're not like deep within the hunting culture, but they harvest their own food. They hunt deer and like one thing, I work in the hunting industry now, and part of the reason I'm doing it is to connect with the hunting industry, the hunting community in a very deep way. And it's been very interesting. There are bad apples in the hunting industry as well, that there are people that don't have great conservation ethics. And that's also part of my role as a conservationist, that occupies the different sides of the spectrum of outdoor industry is try to get more hunters to view themselves as conservationists first, hunters second, because we can't hunt unless we conserve. And that's a message I really care a lot about. And then there's trying to get more people that fall on the animal rights side. I sympathize with them so much because I have that same passion, but for ecosystems. If you really want to change the world, we need not to worry about individual animals. We need to worry about populations and ecosystems, because that's how you're sustainable. If we get caught up in our emotions for individuals and become too emotionally attached to the animals, to the wildlife, then we're not able to really succeed. We can't reach the middle ground to actually move forward and make change. And so that's a very important thing I learned in college is we cannot be emotional as conservationists and as biologists. We have to be very rational, because the reality is humans have a large impact on the landscape. Humans also have needs. So to be very successful to conserving our wildlife, we have to figure out a way to meet human needs and meet wildlife needs. And there's a path forward. To me, the path is slow down the needless urban development and try to restore and conserve as much land as possible before we just turn the entire state of Texas into one giant outlet mall. But so that's kind of the peak of my conservation concern is land. So,
Well, if you could just choose policy or choose a pathway to go, what would you like to see? Because I do think that like having people live in your state is important.
yeah, and thriving economies are great.
Absolutely.
For humans and wildlife. You know,
Right.
more money for conservation, the better. I just wish we had policies that made it harder to develop in ecologically important areas and environmentally sensitive areas.
What would be an area well, I guess because everything's so privately owned, is that where the issue comes in? Or there isn't, someone can just sell it to a developer
Yeah.
without any checks or balances or what are you actually selling and what are we giving up?
That's a big issue. And there are incentives now and methods to keep land conserved, that land that's under private ownership. There are these things called conservation easements, to where you sign a legal document that binds this land into conservation in perpetuity. Like you come up with the terms, and it can be like, you know, we can still do an oil pipeline through here, we can still do natural gas or whatever, but you can never have it can never be sold and turned into a neighborhood, or like it has to maintain its natural features to support wildlife. But you can still do cattle, or you can still do oil and gas, you know, on a smaller scale. That's a big deal in Texas. To give landowners the option to keep their land under conservation forever, no matter who it gets sold to. It can never be developed, but they can still make money off of it, still financially productive. That's a big deal, obviously. I mean, people are trying to survive and live, you know, so like that's one thing a lot of conservationists miss that point. So that's a big one. There's also tax benefits. You can manage your land for wildlife, and if you meet the certain criteria, you can get a tax break. You can get ag exempt. That's very helpful. So there are ways that we're getting private lands under conservation, but that is like the biggest issue right now, is especially these ranches around Houston and Dallas and Austin. The land values are going up so high, and like the land gets passed down to the grandkids that don't have any connection to nature. And all they see is, you know, millions of dollars waiting for them. And it's like hard to blame them. So it's the generational land ownership change has been a big driver of our losses in wildlife habitat. But we're coming up with ways to mitigate that, though.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to, with that the amount of people that are coming in and the change that's going to come as a result of that is, I think, well, I mean, that's great that you guys you're aware of this problem and that you're seeing actual solutions come in and become more common. But it's a big state, man.
Well, and the thing is, people come here because it's this really beautiful state with all the ranch lands, and yet in the process of coming here, we're losing our identity. You know, and not just the wildlife stuff, but just the the aesthetics of like driving through the hill country and just seeing just like cedar covered and oak covered hills and like these limestone outcrops. And you come back 10 years later and there's like a mansion on it.
Yeah.
It's like, man, lucky for them. I would love to live there.
Right.
I mean, if I had the resources, perhaps I would, but what are we doing though? Like, what does Texas look like in, 50 years?
Right.
The issue of losing habitat to urban sprawl, that can't be corrected for. Like once you lose the habitat and it's concrete and like infrastructure, that's gone forever. And that's like that's the part where I really, really wish animal rights activists put that energy that they have for individual animals into ecosystems. Because like once you lose ecosystems, you don't have any animals at all. Yeah. So I really wish hunters, animal rights folks, naturalists, conservationists, all like could get together to be concerned about the issue of habitat loss in particular. I don't know.
And I know we kind of explore different regions, so there might be some differences between the two, but I'd love to get your, like, we travel outdoors off-road and have a very, leave it better than you found it. We have a lot of trail etiquette that we try to adhere to while we're out to protect the environment that we're going out and enjoying. But it's not lost on me that we are driving our vehicles out into nature and bringing whatever that is we bring with us. Yeah. And I can say like, well, we're enjoying nature, which makes us closer to it so that if something does happen, and it is the case, if there's a threat in any way to a certain region or area, usually we are involved in the like, hey, like we're going to bring awareness to this so we become a partner in that as a community. But what are your thoughts about like off-road exploration specifically? Like how much are we devastating?
If there was an off-road community where I live, it would be devastating because I live in just environmentally sensitive areas. Okay. Like in the Piney Woods area, like region. I mean, there is some off-roading parks there, and the devastation there's like it's very devastating to some of those wetland communities and ecosystems, and like sensitive grassland communities. But out west, there's so much just barren habitat where there's not a whole lot of biodiversity. Like the impact is very minimal, and like that's a very ethical recreation to do. I think it's badass. Frankly, I would love to do that sort of stuff, but
we'll get you out west. We got plenty of trails.
Yeah, I think it's great, and if that's how people want to interact with nature, I think that's great. If there are people out there listening that are in that overlanding space, I also encourage you to open your eyes, learn about some of the species around you, because then you will just enhance your experience and connect more with the ecosystems that you spend time in.
I love that though. I mean, I think that's something I want to encourage more is like what you said, like connecting yourself with where you're going. And there are individuals that do that so beautifully in our community. And a lot of them lead like groups out, and they're the ones on the radio giving us the history lesson of the geography or telling us about animals. And I appreciate that because I think it only enhances the experience. Yeah. And then for us, like I've really grown to just love these areas. These are, by exploring these areas, I think we're all finding like some version of therapy. We live in cities, most of us, and work and do all these things, and to get out into nature and to just fall in love. There's such a, and I know you know this, I'm preaching to the choir on this one, but there is such a peace and such a just it quiets the noise. And when we can go out and just connect with nature, like
that's where we're most human.
Yeah.
It's like our roots. A great way to put it. We're an animal just trying to make it in this strange world. And getting back to the natural world, I think, is very good for us.
Yeah, and so many people don't. I mean, it's amazing how many people I run into that are like, I would never, I can't believe you guys do that. And we are probably the most luxurious of all the outdoors people. Sure. with the amount of, luxuries we bring. And
total gearheads.
Yeah, and the ability to have our vehicles there with us and the security that gives us. It's like, we are doing it the easiest way out of, I look at these cross-country hikers where I'm just like, oh my gosh, that is days and days without seeing another human being and just being in nature. Maybe that's my next journey. I wanted to go back to, I meant to ask when you were talking about catching snakes and reptiles, because I don't have an education with animals. We just observe. We don't really try to interact.
Which is great.
Yeah, honestly, generally you probably should not be trying to interact unless absolutely necessary with any wildlife. With all that, the snake interaction and reptile thing, were there ever any bites with bad ones?
I mean, I'm pretty good. I got quick hands.
Okay.
So I've not been bit very often. Like by alligators, I've been bit really just one time. And
By
it was
an alligator?
the very first alligator I ever caught. And I didn't know, like, if they're like under 5 feet long, you don't grab them by the tail because then they just turn around and bite you.
Okay.
When they get bigger, they can't turn
I would
as
choose
quick.
not to ever do
So,
this. So
I got like 2 bite marks across the top of my hand there. You can see them.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
a reminder of how not to grab an alligator. But I was like 15. That was my first alligator. After that, I never got bit, and I've caught a lot of alligators. And like alligators and crocodiles were like what characterized my career starting out. I worked at crocodile facilities. I went to Belize to study crocodiles. Still involved with crocodile stuff, alligator stuff, and croc stuff. But just got bit once by an alligator. I got bit by a croc at this other place I worked at. It was only like 4 feet long, and it just like bit and
only
let go.
4 feet
It like made holes, but it didn't thrash. So I was fine. I didn't tell anybody at work because it's like embarrassing to get bit. Like, it's like you don't want to get bit. So like that happened, and I've been bit once by a venomous snake.
okay.
And that was another product of not having good mentorship. I was just winging it, learning as I went, and I got bit by a copperhead. I was at a very popular lake in East Texas called Sam Rayburn with my family. It's like a family vacation, and I had my buddy with me, and we went out to look for snakes. And one way we find snakes is to like go down roads. And this is before I could drive, so we just walked the roads and found the snake. And then we saw a car coming, and we got really scared because you're not supposed to hunt snakes from the road.
Okay.
It's illegal in Texas. It's considered hunting from a roadway.
Okay.
It's kind of absurd,
Okay.
honestly. Anyway, so like we were like freaking out, and like the copperhead's there, and like oh, it's gonna get run over. So I like just flicked it off the road really fast, and it was a really small snake. It was like it was a baby, and as I was going to move it off the road, it bit me.
Okay.
And I knew it bit me. Like immediately, you feel it, and I knew I got venom immediately too, because a lot of times you'll get a dry bite with venomous snakes. You have like a 50% chance of not getting venom at all.
Really? Okay.
And but like if you do.
Still, do not pick up venomous snakes.
Don't touch venomous snakes. Leave it to the experts. But so yeah, I got bit. My buddy was freaking out more than me. And I had actually got him into snakes around that time, and then I scared him away from them after that.
Well, you're still alive. You're here today, so
I mean,
it
yes,
wasn't.
Copperheads are really not that bad. Their bite is it's like I don't even know what to compare it to. Maybe a bad wasp sting. Like my hand was swollen.
Okay.
But you're not going to lose a finger.
So it's not fatal, or
there's like 1 or 2 fatal bites from copperheads on record. But we had to drive down to a town called Jasper, and I spent the night in the hospital. I did get antivenom, which you don't really need antivenom for most copperhead bites, but mine was pretty bad. It bit me right on the pointer finger, like right there, and so every finger was swollen, like huge.
Okay.
And then the swelling went all the way up my arm, and it stopped about right here. And they would mark it every 30 minutes. They would mark the swelling, and it would just every 30 minutes it would go up like an inch, and it was pretty interesting from like a snake nerd perspective. I thought it was really cool, and the doctors and the nurses were like, "What the fuck is wrong with this kid?" This is like, most of their snake bite victims, they're freaking out and they're going to die. I was like, wow, this is really interesting. But that when they gave me the antivenom, like the swelling went down so fast. It was really kind of interesting. But still got my finger. Still works. But yeah, my right hand gets jacked up though. Copperhead bite, alligator bite, lots of non-venomous snakes. I get bit by non-venomous snakes basically every time I go out. And some of those bites can hurt, but they're it's whatever.
You'll survive.
Yeah.
I mean, copperhead, no big deal.
No.
I mean, we all love animal shows and watching these things in the wild, but what's your favorite animal encounter experience?
Favorite experience? Definitely not the copperhead bite. There's so many moments throughout my life where experienced something with a wild animal that was such a profound experience that I just can't imagine. Like the amount of excitement that I felt was just like, it's like a drug. I don't know how to explain it, but there's been multiple moments like that. Catching my first alligator snapping turtle was one of those moments.
Oh, good Lord.
That's like one of the charismatic like reptiles in the South. And to see one for the first time, that like changed my life. It was just such a profound experience. But favorite animal encounter.
Wait, explain that though. Why was it a profound experience?
Well, the thing is, you don't think you're ever going to see an alligator snapping turtle because they're so secretive.
Okay.
And this one was caught on a trot line, which is like this, like you use them to catch catfish. You hang a line and the hooks are in the water and like the catfish come and get it. But a lot of non-target species get on there, which is kind of the problem with trot lines. A lot of turtles die on them.
Because they're kind of just left there, right?
They'll drown. Or,
yeah.
Or something else will come and kill them. Yeah, I mean, out on a lake and saw this giant tail flailing in the water. You know, it's like, what is that? I was with my buddies. We're going out fishing, and and then I saw the carapace, which is the top part of a turtle shell. It's called the carapace, and I saw the distinct spikes because they got this spiky shell. And my heart dropped. I was like freaking out. I was 16 years old. Where the passion was just so strong for this sort of stuff. I still am passionate, but I control my emotions a little better now. My friends thought I was going crazy, so it's like, fucking get me over there. It was an 80-pound turtle.
Wow.
So I like reached it. Well, actually, when we got close, I grabbed a rod and reel, and I didn't know it was on a line, so I like cast it out and snagged it. And so I was like, I'm gonna reel it in, catch it. But then like I was reeling up and it was caught, so I didn't have to actually hook it. It was already hooked, which I shouldn't have been trying to hook it anyway because they're like a protected species. But
you were
whatever.
A kid.
I was a kid. Kids do dumb things. But we ended up saving his life, so it would have died if we didn't get it off the trot line. But when I reached down to grab it, I didn't realize how big it was. I couldn't pull it into the boat, so my buddies two of my buddies had to pull me and the turtle into the boat, and I was just for like a month straight. I was just high on that experience. Like I couldn't stop thinking about it, and then it finally wore off. I was like, dang, I need to go find another one. But I still get that high every now and then, you know, when I have a profound experience in nature, or I've gone down to Belize. I did an internship in Belize studying crocodiles. So like going out at night deep in the rainforest with legendary croc scientist Dr. Marissa Tejas. She's like my first wildlife mentor. Down there with her catching crocs in an area where they don't ever see people. Like this is a wild place. It's like the Amazon of Central America, the Chiquiboy rainforest, and catching my first wild croc was another one of those moments that I was just high on the experience. And it was also, you know, we were doing science. It was my first time doing actual science, like collecting data, like catching the animal, bringing it in, taking measurements, weighing it, putting a pit tag in it, which is how they can identify that animal if they catch it again for mark recapture studies, and learning from Marissa. Like the whole experience in itself was really profound.
Is there a marked behavior difference between like truly wild crocs who have not had a lot of contact with humans, or maybe none? What would be the differences in behavior?
Well, interestingly, these crocs, since they never see people, they're very easy to catch. I thought it would be the opposite effect. Okay. Like if I'm going to catch an alligator, and I'm permitted to catch alligators in Texas, like alligators that end up in people's pools and backyards, I'm licensed to go and capture them and move them to a facility or relocate them.
I can now say I've met somebody who has a permit.
It's a lot of fun. But down there, those crocs, the more or less crocodile, they never see people. So in Texas, I have to use a rod and reel to like cast and like snag them with the hook and then reel them in. It takes like an hour.
That's not a normal fish
hook. It's like redneck deep sea fishing out there, you know, like giant surf rods and it's very hard to do. But so down there though, the crocs were so like confused by the lights. We're out there at night, so that's the easiest way to. That's when they're most active, and you can see their eye shine. And like if you just roll up on them and just noose them straight from the boat. Wow. And so like you just roll up, like cinch the noose, and they just go crazy, and you got to try to hold on. And the big one I noosed, it's like a 6-foot female. She knocked my headlight off. I bought this really expensive headlight. You know the brand Streamlight?
Yes.
I figured you know, gear and stuff. You know all that stuff. But so yeah, Streamlight's like really nice headlights, like a $200 headlight. Knocked it off my head. into the water.
Oh.
But it was waterproof, so like the river was illuminating. It was like the Mayan river gods took my light.
You were having this moment.
And so like after we got done processing the animal, our guide, I don't know if he was actually Mayan, but he looked Mayan, but he was like, "You're welcome to go get it." I was like, "I think I'll pass."
We're just gonna leave
I
it
don't know
there.
how deep it was, but
So I wanted to mention that you have your own personal podcast.
correct. Yeah.
And I'm assuming the topic is similar to but I would love to share with the audience where you're putting all of this information and your experiences.
Yeah. So it's called The Wildlife Experience. The inspiration to start my podcast was to like bring all these people into one space. And it's been fun, I do find myself, I need to be a better host. Sometimes I feel like I talk too much because I'm too passionate about some of the topics, and some of my guests have so much to say. And anyhow, I'm not being a very good advocate for my own podcast, but it's well received. It is a place for pretty like off the cuff conversations.
That's so cool. I think, this whole podcast generation, and we all know there's millions of podcast options, but it's so fun. I think we're all finding a love of conversation. And those of us that are really hungry for like life experience, whether that be, physically going and doing something, I think we're finding just as much joy in the experience of like sitting down with somebody and hearing about theirs.
Yeah.
So on that note, thank you for sharing this experience with me. I really appreciate you coming out, and hopefully the rain stops and you get to enjoy our environment here.
I'm all for it. Such an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that's a wrap. Glover, we ran out of time.